All right, hello. Hello, can you hear me? I hope I'm coming through okay. Does anyone know what this game is right here? This game is called Bloom, Tome of Power, and it was a Wolverine Soft Studio production over the summer. In fact, it was one of 2 games that Wolverine Soft Studio created during that summer, and wow, are they fantastic. They were really, really great. The team did a wonderful job. And I encourage you to play both of them. You can Google them if you want to. You'll find them on itch.io. Wolverine Soft Studio, does anyone know what that is? What is Wolverine Soft Studio? Anyone know what that is? Let me grab the website really quickly. wolverinesoft.org. Wolverine Soft Studio is kind of our game dev focused MDP team that was created by Nico Williams, currently run by Amber Renton, who's your IA for this course. And it is a project course in which you can earn credit, kind of like Solar Car, for contributing to a big game production. So one team, one semester, one game. And yeah, you get to work on not a 4-person team in East 494, but on a 30-person team in Wolverine Soft Studio. And the amount of challenges that you face in terms of the logistics, in terms of making contributions that don't clobber what your teammates are working on, simply managing the Git repository is suddenly a full-time job, and you learn a ton. So if you like 494, if you're looking for a way to get some a handful of credits and contribute to a cool project, get it on your resume, your portfolio, then go for it. Okay. You can register. I think you'll register by being in the Wolverine Soft Discord server, because I don't think registration is ready quite yet. But anyway, how's everyone doing? Are we all doing okay? Who's tired? Who's a little bit tired? Who's kind of feeling it? We're less than a month out from the showcase. We're less than a month out from summer break, and I have a feeling we're a little bit tired. Yeah, a little bit tired. Mandelbrot's a little bit tired. I feel you. Hang in there. You're almost there. We didn't really get a spring break like we normally do, but we'll have to make it through. If you look at our schedule, where we are right now, we really are not that far away. We have just a small handful of weeks left until the showcase. You are currently in the middle of your P3 Milestone 2 deliverable. And it's essentially the same as your P3 Milestone 1. Not really many changes. Next week, you'll start writing dev blogs that are public, on the internet. And that'll be a little bit different. But, just another week, right? How many of you you've all gotten your video feedback from instructors on your P3 Milestone deliverable? Has anyone looked at that yet? Anyone had a chance to watch their video feedback? Anyone? No? I have a feeling teams usually wait kind of until the evening to watch the video feedback. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, when you watch it, note that it was a rough week across the board. but there are a ton of points still on the board, and you shouldn't worry. Don't panic if your grade was maybe a little bit lower than you hoped for. Just watch the feedback, think about your core mechanics and how you can make just the basic acts in your game enjoyable and interesting and deep, and you'll be okay, all right? We've got a lot of time left, we got a lot of points left. This is a project that is weighted toward the final deliverables heavily on purpose, so that you are rewarded for, if you make mistakes early, it's okay, but you're rewarded for getting to a good place by the time the project ends. So, okay, you are currently in the middle of 2 extra credit assignments. So, if you weren't feeling super good about where you were on the P3 milestone, if you're a little bit nervous about your grade in this course, then I encourage you to look into both of these extra credit assignments. In part because they're very lucrative, especially for how much time you have to invest in them, okay? These are very short assignments that have a lot of points associated with them. Let's take a look at the first one. So this course is not the only game development course in town. We have other courses that are really, really great too. Has anyone in chat heard of or taken the PAT 305 course led by Professor Matthew Thompson? Has anyone taken that course? It's a fantastic course. It's a pretty lightweight course, so it's not very stressful, but you'll learn a ton about the history of video game audio. You'll learn a ton about the modern techniques that developers will use to make audio really impactful in modern games. So I encourage you to look into this course and potentially take it in the future if you need some extra credits. If you need extra credit for this course, EECS 494, then you have the 494 Freelancer Cooperation assignment. This is an assignment that is due on Monday, and it allows you to essentially go and get outside help from certain disciplines. You can go out and you can get a piece of music from a musician in PAT 305. You can go out and you can get a 3D model or some sprites from an artist external to this course. You can go out and you can get some voice acting for your game from the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, the Voice Acting Club Forums, Casting Call Club. And when you do these things, you'll get 5 points of extra credit for implementing these external assets into your game, okay? This is essentially meant to get you thinking externally, thinking about how to interact with external partners, thinking about how to manage a kind of freelancer-style relationship where you are creating your own specifications, like, okay, I want the character to look like this is the purpose of the character, this is when we need it done, we're going to check in at this date, right? Correspondence is going to be via this email. And in order to complete this assignment by Monday, you will fill out this template. It is a spreadsheet. You'll make a copy of. You will change the name up here. You'll change it to your game name by studio name. You'll provide 4 screenshots in each of these cells. You'll provide the game's description, its pitch. You'll provide the contact email address, so how do freelancers get in contact with you. You'll create a Windows build, a Mac build, and then at the very bottom, you'll specify what you're looking for in terms of help. So for a 3D artist freelancer, you might say something like, oh, I'm seeking 3D modelers who want to build a gingerbread house that players will defend from angry ants during gameplay. For a musician, right, we need a really serene kind of mountainside, astral feeling, chill music, background music for our game. Or maybe you need a voice actor. We are looking for a cyborg ninja protagonist who's going to be really cool, right? Have a really gravelly voice. Oh yeah, right? Going to take down all the bad guys. Or maybe like an announcer character, like ready, go, right? Level complete, something like that. Anyway, if you fill out this form, you'll get 5 points of extra credit for each of the disciplines that you integrate into your game. Okay? We need to have that by Monday so that we can send it out to the other courses. And get freelancers to you, all right? That's a lot of extra credit and not a ton of work for it, so please consider it, okay? There's another extra credit assignment. This one you actually have 2 weeks instead of 1 to finish. You have the P3 Analytics assignment. This extra credit assignment is all about helping you and your team build additional intelligence by adding analytics into your game. So thinking back to the example we gave of Naughty Dog and Jak and Daxter, you had a AAA team that was building a game, and they wanted to know where the most difficult parts of the game were. So they implemented a system where it would log to some sort of file, some sort of data structure, whenever anyone died. And so someone would die, and it would create a text file, maybe an XML file that said one death happened here, and then within their game they could actually visualize and see where people were dying. And that was really helpful to them, even though it turned them astray. It led them astray sometimes. So with this extra credit assignment, we are tasking you with coming up with some form of automated analytics so that when someone playtests your game, you will get that data, and you can hopefully learn something more about your game and your user's experience via that data. Unity has its own built-in powerful analytics system that will allow you to have a really beautiful online dashboard, which we can kind of see here, and it'll allow you to send analytics data to this dashboard online via a single line function call. Which is really, really nice. I encourage you to use it if you want. Can we see an example in here, maybe? No, just a bunch of graphs. Yeah, no example. But you can then use that data to visualize stuff if you want to. Anyway, your assignment here, your deliverables for this extra credit, if you want to get the extra 10 points, is you need to submit a document with a description of the analytics that you chose to implement. You then need to send screenshots or video proof of that data. Okay, we want to see that you've collected the data, and we want to see what form it takes and how you're using it. Okay, just as proof that you are in fact collecting data and using it somehow. We then need a screenshot of your consent screen. You must have one, and it needs to be a consent screen that allows the user to turn off the analytics tracking when they play the game. Okay, and it could be something as simple as a radio button. 2 radio buttons on your main menu that simply says, allow data recording for improvement of game, and the user can click no on that if they don't want it, and you'll just turn off your function calls. You just won't execute them if the user says that. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions? It's pretty easy, both of these. So if you've had a rough deliverable, if you had a rough P1 or a rough P2. We should have the P2 grades back to you pretty soon, by the way. I think our deadline is Sunday, or maybe it's next Tuesday. It's coming soon at any rate. If you have had a trouble in the course, if you're maybe a little bit behind where you want to be, these extra credits are really easy opportunities to get a big block of points back. Okay, and if you're worried about your P3, or if you just want to hedge your bets a little bit, then it's really recommended to do this, okay? Both of these will contribute to the quality of your P3, even without considering the points you get for the extra credit. Okay, so let's get into our announcements. Those are the new assignments today, but we have a ton of announcements. One of them is really, really fun. I found this Reddit post that is really cool and unique in how it can help you understand the different roles that occur on a big game team. If you remember last week, we talked about how a big game team will specialize. What kind of disciplines do you find on a big game team? And what are their challenges, and what tools do they use? Well, this document right here, this Reddit post, is really funny in that it takes the idea of a door game mechanic. There's a door in your game. There are doors, and you open them to walk through, and you can close them, right? It takes the concept of doors, and it says, how would every discipline in a game development team, how would every role in a game dev team react to the creation of a door? What would they care about? A creative director would say, yes, we definitely need doors in this game, right? Because a creative director kind of sets the vision for what the game will be. A project manager says, okay, I'll put time on the schedule for people to make the doors. So they're all about allocating resources and making sure that we can do the things that we want to. The vision is possible. That's their role. A designer would say, I wrote the document explaining what we need these doors to do and how they're going to work. A concept artist would then say, okay, I made some gorgeous painting of the doors, right? This is how we want the doors to look when they're actually in the game. Here's an image. An art director might say the third painting is exactly the style of doors we want in our game to be consistent with all the other art assets in our game. Environmental artists would be, I took this painting of a door and made it into an object in the game. Animator would say, I made the door open and close, so it has animations now. A sound designer would say, I made the sounds the door creates, blah, blah, blah. An FX artist, I added some cool sparks to the door when it opens. A writer would say, when the door opens, the player will say, hey, look, the door opened. An AI programmer would say, enemies in AI now know if a door is there and whether they can go through it or not. A combat designer would say, enemies will spawn behind doors and lay cover fire as their allies enter the room, unless the player is looking inside the door, in which case they will spawn behind a different door. The systems designer, a level 4 player earns 148 XP for opening the door at the cost of 3 gold. Okay, you get the point, right? And then at the very end, we have customer support. A player contacted us confused about doors. I gave them detailed instructions on how to use them. And a player, of course, says, I didn't even notice there was a door there. Right? All this effort going into a mechanic that players may very well ignore. Okay, so please feel free to read through this entire thing if you wish. This agenda, this lecture plan is posted to the schedule, so you can find it right now if you want to. Okay, that's a spoiler for what we'll be doing later, okay? So I want to tell you a little story about Capcom and Street Fighter V. I don't think I've told this story to this course yet, this semester. But who's heard of Street Fighter V? Who's played it? Does anyone play those kind of games, fighting games, in the chat? Yeah, no, maybe? How many people are sleeping, I wonder? I wouldn't blame you. You're working very hard, but be sure to watch these lectures at least on double speed a little bit later, after they post to YouTube, okay? So, Street Fighter V was an interesting story. It's a fighting game, and it launched... yes, so you've listened to soundtracks. Evanir has played it on occasion. Street Fighter V was an interesting game. It was worked on for a long time, and a lot of resources were poured into it. Interestingly, when the PC version was launched, it had a very controversial launch, in that the game came out and it included a rootkit in the download. A rootkit, right? A piece of malware that basically gets into your operating system and compromises your computer. So in other words, if you downloaded Street Fighter V like in the first few days of its launch, you were hacked, okay? And that's really, really, really not good. When this happens, a bunch of articles come out about it, and the people who would buy your game decide not to do it. If you know something about the how a AAA release makes its money, big game launches usually make most of their money and their development money back. They go into the positive within the first couple weeks of a launch, okay? And then the sales really trail off. When this happened, right? When this happened, a lot of sales were lost for the team that made it. A lot of effort went to waste. And despite the fact that the team had worked so hard to make this game, it didn't actually lower the risk of a catastrophic failure. And one happened. So you can imagine that maybe it was something in the version control. They had a piece of software on their development machines that rootkit their systems for some development purpose, but they accidentally clicked a checkbox and included it in the PC build. And as a result, they lost just tremendous amount of potential just because of one little checkbox, okay? I'll give you another example of a huge amount of effort going to waste by a small problem that could have been caught. The Mars Climate Rover. Has anyone heard of the Mars Climate Rover? Orbiter, sorry. The Mars Climate Orbiter was a kind of 1998 creation of NASA. It cost many millions of dollars to produce. And it was supposed to go to Mars and kind of orbit around it. Collect data, do experiments, stuff like that. However, when it got to Mars, instead of orbiting around Mars like an orbiter should, it instead decided to accelerate into the face of Mars and smash into it hard. And as a result, it exploded on Mars instead of doing its job. Now, the reason this happened, right? Many millions of dollars in careers and legacies were spent on this orbiter, and it was all undone when one external contracting team used imperial units in their calculations versus the internal NASA teams, which were like listing their specs in metric. So a simple small mix-up of units, imperial versus metric, caused this rover to smash hard into the face of Mars and probably ruined a lot of careers, okay? And certainly burned a lot of taxpayer money. So that's another example. Another example is James Cordier, a hedge fund manager, I believe, who lost all of his clients' money, about $150 million worth, on a few risky bets, and spawned a meme that looks somewhat like this. It's a little bit sad. He had to go onto video and explain to everyone, how he had managed to lose all of their money, $150 million worth. That's kind of a career-ending move right there. That's tough, very tough. But here's the takeaway, and here's why I bring these things up. Okay, the more you invest in something, the more verification you need to prevent a disaster. Just because you're dumping money, dumping your heart and soul into something, doesn't mean that it's going to, that it won't all come collapsing down because of one tiny thing that you missed. All right. So this relates to your P3 work in that you should try and develop habits to get around this. You want to catch as many things. You want to build in redundancy into your processes if you can. Here's what I mean. When one of you goes to submit on Sunday night or Monday morning, submit to their deliverable to the campus. Do not just have one person submit and then call it a day. That person should submit and then tell everyone they've submitted, and then everyone should download the thing they submitted and check through the requirements list and the rubric, the deliverables section, one last time to make sure everything is there, to make sure you're not going to get any penalty, to make sure the game runs, okay, on Mac and Windows if you can. And as a result, you are probably going to avoid any catastrophic penalty, all right? You're going to avoid any catastrophic issues at the showcase. You're going to release a build, it's going to work, it's going to be good, okay? So anyway, try and build in, we're humans, right? We're going to make mistakes, but we can overcome that tendency by developing habits and developing redundancy. So let's do it. A little bit of an ad here. EECS 499, you are going to be backpacking and registering for courses very soon. EECS 499, if you're interested in game development, if you're interested in continuing to work on and study game dev here before you graduate, Wolverinesoft Studio, which we showed you at the beginning, is a really great thing. It's a really great option for you to earn credit and get a fantastic portfolio piece. EECS 499 is another course that's available to you. It is a Flex Tech course in which you can choose how many credits you want to take it for, and that lowers and raises your workload. It is a course in which you are essentially given free rein to investigate and study any area of game dev research that you want. Have you ever wanted to automatically generate environments? Well, we had a student who did that. Nigel Charleston had his automation generation research project in which he talked with Sucker Punch out in Bellevue, and he basically discovered, he learned how they built their environments for Ghost of Tsushima, which they released not long ago. And he also built a tool that allows you to adjust and generate randomly a topography via Perlin noise techniques, and then you can actually walk around, and it's really cool. Okay. Another example is what Ishwar decided to work on when he took EECS 499. It was a gamification of music education. He went and let's actually take a look here. He went and he built a game. He went and he built a mobile game on Android that allows you to solve puzzles and help a character get through an area by essentially customizing a beat rhythm. And so it was really, really, really fun to play. And he took it and he showed it off at the Design Expo, and it went over really well. And he released it on the App Store. And I think I didn't quite link. Ishwar, if you want to, you can put your game into the your App Store link, Google Play link into the chat, okay? Let's take a look at one more. We had a student, Matoska Waltz, who found an open source project that was essentially a machine learning bot for playing through Celeste. It was kind of like Mar.io, which we showed previously. It was a bot that used a neural network and genetic algorithm to kind of play through the game and refine a neural network that mapped a downsampled representation of the world through a network to some inputs on a controller that would actually move the main character. And when he found this bot, this open source project, it was not very good. It was slow. It wasn't using all the data in the environment, and it was only getting, occasionally it was getting to the end of the first area, the first room. Matoska went in and he used his 3 or 4 months of $4.99 to improve this open source project to the point where it was now 10 times faster, so an order of magnitude faster than it used to be, and it also had more data, so it was a smarter algorithm as well. And as a result, he was able to achieve a world record and create a machine learning algorithm that allowed Madeline to get to the 4th room instead of the 1st, okay? He was able to get to the end of the 4th room, I believe. So it's super, super cool, super impactful. He pushed those changes to the project, and now the community is super grateful for his work. Very, very impactful stuff. At any rate, if you're interested in doing research and exploring game development, whatever topic you choose, a little bit deeper than 494 can provide, then consider registering for the course. It's a lot more lenient, it's a lot more relaxed and chill than 494 is. It's not nearly as intensive and fast. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. We do have to fill out an application and do a little bit of writing over our break in order to get you into the course, but it's not a big deal, okay? All right. So, your 2 assignments, your 2 extra credits have released. A note for P3, if your game feels a little bit lifeless right now, if it feels like it's not that engaging, it's a little bit boring, like your emotions aren't affected when you play it, one of the reasons this probably is because you're currently missing audio. It's very easy to underestimate the true power of good audio, of having an ambient track, like the sounds of an office, a computer fan humming, right, in the background. Having some background music to set the tone, the emotional content of this current scene. And sound effects to give you punchiness, to give you a feeling of juice and impactfulness in your game, to help players understand your game state. If you can get these things into your game, and you should have someone who's focusing on this ideally, and get some in for your next deliverable, your game's going to feel entirely different. It's going to feel much more interesting to play, it's going to feel more engaging, your players are going to be, and your graders are going to be much more invested in what happens in the game. And so I recommend that you start working on that now, like ASAP, if you haven't already. It's going to make a huge difference, and we will start to expect it in your weekly deliverables. It will affect your grade if it isn't already in tiny indirect ways, okay? Okay, Unity Analytics, this isn't super important. It's just an example that shows, Unity.com will give you your dashboard and visualize your data for you. It can be as simple as like a single function call to send data to the Unity dashboard, okay? So yeah, pretty boring. I will tell you though, the analytics that you're going to do on this project are probably going to be pretty simple, unless you have someone who's really excited about analytics. If you move on to a larger company, you'll find that the analytics systems get a lot more interesting. At Arbor Interactive, we actually have the ability to replay entire game sessions because we will record your inputs. And because our games are deterministic, you can actually replay those inputs. You can mock those inputs on the frame in which the user actually generated them themselves, and you can actually see exactly what their input was like, what happened in their gameplay session. Here's an example of my cursor, right? And then the fake cursor. The big one is fake. And if the player ever clicks, you'll see it go red. And as a result, we can see them on the loading screen for an old game that was in production. We can see them moving their cursor around. We can see them click right there. The cursor just went red to go to the main menu. And then we can see them dragging the cursor around and messing with the icons, right? It's really cool because it helps us understand what the users care about and what situations they run into, okay? It's really nice to get a summary of data, but it's also really nice sometimes to be able to go in and watch and see exactly what happened. Okay. All right, so anyway, Ishwar produced a UI tips and tricks video, which is really awesome. He posted it to YouTube, so if you have any stuff you're dealing with UI and you're running into any troubles or you want any tips and techniques, you can watch that video, okay? I encourage you to. Watch it on double speed and get some knowledge fast. Okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like to do 2 mini lectures, both of them on topics that have a good chance of being important to your Project 3 team. The first topic I want to cover is actually, it's in the wrong order here. It is the topic of animation repositories, and in particular, Mixamo, okay? And then I want to cover the topic of scriptable objects. Scriptable objects are a really, really nice resource that allows you to create files in your game from a class in your C# codebase. Or in other words, it allows you to take a C# class that might be like a container for some configuration. Maybe a level configuration or a puzzle config. The puzzle is going to be this big, it's going to have this name, it's going to play this music when you interact with the puzzle. And it allows you to create files out of those that then you can then use in your game and customize. In other words, it's a way of storing it and creating a database of config for your gameplay. Okay, let's go ahead and create some animations. Now, this is an engineering course. This is not an animation course. This is not a 3D art course. This is not really even an art course. So we really need to get practiced with using external assets when it comes to art, most of us. And one of the best assets for animation is a service called Mixamo, okay? Now, what I'm going to do, this is going to be a little bit strange to you, seeing our friend from the swamp here, but essentially what you do, Mixamo is a big repository of animation content. And what you do is you say, first of all, I want to upload a character. I'm going to upload a character that I'm then going to try out a bunch of animations on. Well, what you can do is you can grab a zip file, drag it in, the zip file that contains your FBX, your textures, your models, stuff like that, and Mixamo will do its best to kind of parse through that file and try and rig it up for you, create the bones out of it. So here's Shrek, right? Here's Shrek, and now we are going to tell Mixamo where the various parts of this character are. Where are the wrists? Where are the elbows? Where's the chin? And it will generate bones from our placements here. So the groin is going to be right here in the middle, and we'll generate some bones. We'll rig it, auto-rig it. It'll take about 2 minutes. And as a result, we will now have a character that can do a bunch of animations for us. Has anyone watched Shrek recently or interacted with the meme mascot? Here we go. Here it is. And now it's animating with this kind of idle look around pose. Okay, so next we now have our character in here, and we can choose, not Fortnite, we can choose any animation that we want to demo. So let's say that we have a shoved reaction with spin. There's a cutscene in which Donkey pushes Shrek, and Shrek's kind of frustrated about that. So we've clicked on it, and now it's going to load up that animation. Come on, let's go. It's acting really slow for me. I'm not sure why, but look at that. We now have a little animation here. Maybe I need to refresh. Maybe I need to refresh the page here. It'll work a little bit better. Okay, let's see if Shrek can do a little bit of a capoeira. Let's see some moves, Shrek. Okay, so we'll click on it. We'll let it load here. Okay, and there we go. Looks pretty good, huh? Okay, so let's say that we're pretty happy with this animation, and there are tons of animations. You can search for them if you want. But let's say that we're happy with this animation and we want to put it into our game. So what do? Well, we go to download and we want to specify not just FBX format, but also FBX for Unity. I believe it does a little bit of customization that helps it work a little bit better with the engine, though a normal FBX will work. I tried it last night. And we'll go ahead and we will do a download. It will then download that FBX file for us, which will include not only the model, but will also include the animations as well. Yeah, it's a little bit slow. I think it's just my computer, because I'm streaming at the same time. We'll go ahead and save. And that is now finished saving. We'll go ahead and boot up our Unity game here, where I actually already did some stuff, so we'll have to delete that. Let's delete that. There we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a new folder here. Let's call this Shrek 2. We'll go ahead and we'll bring in that downloadable stuff. Okay. So there it is. Shrek Capoeira. We'll go ahead and bring it in to our project pane. Okay, we now have our model here, so we'll bring it into the hierarchy. We will zoom in on it. Look at how small it is. It's so small. We're gonna go to our model, and we're gonna tell its model that it should import with, let's say, a scale factor of 100. Okay, there we are. So we've got Shrek here. Now we need to be able to see Shrek. So can we see Shrek? We can see his back a little bit. So let's go ahead and bring Shrek down a little bit. We're gonna bring him over here. We're gonna rotate him 180 degrees on the y-axis. Bring him over here a little bit. Does that look okay? Okay, that looks okay. That looks scary to me. Oh boy. Okay, so we're gonna play the game and nothing. We get nothing. A whole lot of nothing happens. Actually, we got an error. We got an error because some of the code I wrote for the last section wasn't meant to ever compile. But let's go ahead and to compile again, and we'll go ahead and run the game. So not every one of your teams is doing 3D, and that's totally fine. This might not be as useful for those teams. However, the thing that we're going to cover next, scriptable objects, should be useful for every team, okay? So if we play the game right now, we're going to notice that nothing actually happens. And that's because this game object doesn't have any components, right? Remember, if you want basically anything to happen in Unity, you need a component that does that job. And as far as animation is concerned, we care about the animator component. The animator component is responsible for basically creating progress, right? Progressing a set of objects through an animation. So let's go to Shrek 2 here, and I want to create, if we look at this, we can see that it's missing an animation controller. So I want to go ahead in here and create a, let's create an animation controller right here. Let's call this Shrek 2 Animator. And we can double click here and it'll open up this finite state machine. This might be very familiar to you if you used a finite state machine on Project 1 in Zelda or Metroid. In order to get new nodes for this finite state machine, this graph that we're constructing, we need to actually find the animations. And we can open up our model and find it right here, Capoeira, okay? This is the icon that you always get, this kind of moving triangle that represents an animation. We can drag it in here, and boom, there we go. We've got a Capoeira node in here, and as soon as the game begins, we're going to enter that animation. So let's see what happens. Nothing will happen though because we didn't hook up our that controller that we created to our animator component. So now it is hooked up, and we can hope that it starts animating. Let's see. Hey, there we go. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that it only plays once. It doesn't loop. This is actually something we need to fix in the animation itself. So we'll click on the animation, we'll go to Edit, and if we look at its animation settings, it actually has a loop time that is not enabled. So we'll enable that, apply, and then when we play the game, let's see if it continues. I've got an egg right here. Yay. Okay. So, yeah, now it's working, right? So that's awesome. And you can use the animator just like you did in Project 1 to turn an animation on and off, to blend into other animations, and it should be a good time for you. A lot of indie games get a lot of value out of Mixamo, because while this might seem funny, you could take another 3D model and it would look a lot more natural. Indie games get a lot of their animations out of Mixamo and get a lot of movement and productivity out of doing it. So please consider it if you have a 3D game. Now, the next thing that I would like you to consider, is how you can associate data, gameplay-related data, with a world, with in-game stuff. So, customizability. Let's say that we're making a game that's all about Shrek going on tour. Okay, Shrek is a phenomenal singer, right? We know that, and he wants to take his music to the world. And so we're designing our game, and we say we're going to have a hub world. We're going to have a hub world where the player, has to move, and when they touch a trigger, it's going to cause a concert to launch. And a concert is sort of like a level, okay? I think it is possible to bundle more than one animation into kind of like an animation pack that's all in one FBX file. I don't use Mixamo a ton, so you might want to Google that, but I believe it is possible. It seems like a very intuitive thing for them to do. So, let's say that we're creating a world map, and we want to have some triggers in this world map, represented by these cubes that we're going to have. And these cubes are going to be, there we go. These cubes are going to have colliders on them, but they're going to be triggers. You can see that we made them a trigger right there. And these cubes are going to be concert triggers. So as soon as the player touches them, it causes a... actually, let's do lowercase. Concert. It causes a concert to begin. Now, the game designer is going to look at these two triggers and say, well, I want one to launch a certain concert with a certain music and certain songs, and I want the other to be a different concert that launches certain music and certain songs. And so how should we structure that configuration? Well, the first thing that you'll probably want to do is you'll want to create a component, right? Let's call this concert trigger. Actually, let's call it concert trigger 2 since we created one in the last section. Concert trigger 2 for the second section. Ooh. When you say you're tired, I'm feeling it too. Okay. Okay, so we have our concert trigger component right here. And if you think about it, one of the first things you want to do is you want to get your on trigger enter function going, and then you probably want to have some sort of launch concert function. And if you wanted to allow each concert to be customized, then you might start doing stuff like this: public string concert name. You might have something like public int number of songs. You might have something like public int reward money. And the player, the designer, would be able to customize all of these things in the inspector once you finish compiling, right? Those variables, because they're public, are going to appear here. Come on. Reloading. Let's go. Okay, see? So we now have those variables down there, and we can use these to customize what kind of concert is going to happen when Shrek touches this trigger. However, this is a little bit messy, and it's also going to be hard for us to change and tweak, particularly if we're on a team, because if one team member tries to balance and tweak it, and another team member has done something to it, we're going to get a conflict, okay? So that's not good. What we'd like to do is we would actually like to take these variables right here, and we would like to put them into their own separate config file. And, you know, we would have this config file associated with our trigger by doing something like this, having a public variable. Let's call this concert config datum 2, okay? And we're just gonna call this the config for this object. Then, when we collide with Shrek, we're gonna launch the concert. What concert are we gonna launch? We're gonna launch our config, the concert that has been configured. It's gonna be a parameter into this function, and then we'll do some logic in here that is like set up concert using config data in config variable parameter. Okay. Now, we don't actually have this data type yet, but we're going to create one, and we're going to create one in a very specific way that gives us a lot of power. So let's go in, and we're going to create a new data type. Let's go ahead and create a new folder here where we can store these data types. We need to move a little bit faster so we can get to our break on time. We're going to create a new folder. Let's call this scriptable objects, okay? The scriptable objects folder. We're going to create a new data type, which is represented by a new C# file. We're going to call this the concert config datum 2, okay? And if you're confused by the word datum, it's just data except singular, not plural. So let's go back here. We'll double click. We'll double click and come on, let's go. Uh-oh, I'm a little bit slow here. Okay, here we go. So the first thing you'll note is that we don't really care about this being a component. We don't really want it to be a component. So we'll go ahead and get rid of our update and start functions, and we'll get rid of the inheritance from the mono behavior. Remember, inheriting from mono behavior is what turns a normal vanilla C# class into a component that you can attach to game objects. Instead of deriving from mono behavior and becoming a component, we're going to derive from scriptable object and become a scriptable object as a result. Okay? There's one other thing you need to do, and this is something unfortunately you just need to remember, but we need to add one line to this class. We need to add an attribute called createAssetMenu. This is an asset, this is an attribute that when you put it in front of a class, it becomes possible to create that class via a menu in the Unity editor itself. So when we create a new scriptable object, what do we want it to be called? Let's call it new SO, new scriptable object, new SO, okay? Where do we want this menu item to create this new scriptable object? Where do we want it to be? Let's put it in, how about the config menu, and let's call it create a new scriptable object 2. Actually, no, let's create new concert config 2. How about create new CC2? There you go. Okay. Now we can go back to Unity editor. We'll let it compile a little bit. And drum roll. Come on, let's go. Drum roll, come on. Okay, so we're done compiling. Now, if we go into our project view and we right-click and go to Create, we'll see our config option and then Create New CC2. It's right there. Okay, just where we thought it would be. So we've got a new file now called new SO. Let's call this the Ann Arbor concert. And we're going to create another one. We're going to call it the Detroit concert. Let's go create a new, so do Detroit concert. And these two files now kind of represent our two different concerts that are in the game. We can now associate these objects, these triggers, with their proper concert. So we can drag the Ann Arbor concert, which is the first stage, into there. We can add our concert trigger 2 right here to the second trigger, and we will add the Detroit concert right into there. You can see it right here. We've dragged in the Detroit concert. And now we can actually start customizing our concert config datums. So if you see, when we click on these, we actually don't get anything. And the reason is, it's because we don't have any properties. We don't have any variables to configure inside of this class. But we can start creating them. So let's say that every concert in our game needs to have a concert name. Let's call this concert name. Every, public string. I think I'm getting kind of tired. Every concert needs to also have a reward money. Okay, so the number of dollars you get for completing the concert successfully, we'll call this concert reward dollars. Now, if we save right there and we go back to our Unity editor, it'll compile the new concert config datum 2 class, and as a result, in our inspector, we'll actually see those fields, and we can customize them, and we can save them, and we can have multiple people working on different files at the same time without configs, and it's going to be a good time, right? So now the Ann Arbor concert can be like, hey, we're going to call this Ann Arbor Madness. There you go. Ann Arbor Madness is the first concert, and it's a pretty cool concert, but you only get 500 for completing it. Our other concert is going to be the Detroit concert, and you're going to get $1,000 for completing that one. It's a much bigger city. And there you go. So now you can actually look at these triggers. You can see what kind of concert it's going to launch, and you can double click to see the details of that concert. We can actually go further if we want to. We can say, you know what? I want each concert to be comprised of shows. So maybe one concert has multiple shows inside of it. So we've got a list now of shows. We'll call this shows, and there we go. We need to create that new shows data type, though. We need to mark it as serializable so that it can render in the editor, the Unity editor. We'll create that new data type, public class show, and let's say every show needs its own name as well. So string show name. It also has a list. Every show has a list of songs that get played in that show, and that's represented by a list of strings. So let's call this songs, and there you go. Okay. Let's say that each concert, when you access it from the hub world, actually has a little intro jingle that it plays before the concert actually launches and begins. So let's call this audio clip concert intro jingle. Okay, and we'll move that. It's the second most important thing in here, so we'll move that to the second place. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to our inspector and see how it looks now. Okay, so, we got an error actually. So we got show here. Oh, we're gonna have to call the show 2 because we already have multiple definitions of the same class as a result. Oh, do we have another? Nope, we're still compiling. Still compiling. Okay, good. So now when we look at our concert configuration datums, we now have more information. We can actually specify an audio file if we want to. And we don't have any, but we could if we wanted to. We can specify how many shows. So let's say that there's 2 shows in this first concert. There is the Donkeys intro show, and then there is the Shrek's Smash Mouth show. Okay, and the songs in here, we've got one song that Shrek plays, only one, it's All Star, and Donkey plays a song, The Victors, which is the Michigan fight song. And there you go. We can just make these things more and more complicated. We can add features to them, and people can customize these things. One of the coolest parts about this is that if you ever have a trigger that doesn't yet have a config, you can click this little circle button, and Unity will only give you the options of the configs that exist. So it's really, really good for designers. They don't need to scour through your entire project code base to find these concerts. It's just given to them right here. Okay, you can then go in to your concert trigger code, and you can say, hey, this configuration data structure, it now has some cool data types that we can use. Like it has an intro jingle. So if the concert intro jingle is not equal to null, so the designer specified a jingle they want to play, then we can do something like audio source dot play clip at point, and we can go, hey, what clip? The jingle, of course. And we can play it where the camera is. So camera.main.transform.position, and boom, we can do other stuff. So we can do a toast for the concert's name so that the UI displays the name of the concert whenever you select it. So go toast manager dot request toast, right? And we'll request that piece of text. And so that's kind of the pipeline. That is how you can create these data structures that are really easy to customize and configure and move about and assign in the project. And you can use them. This is a super, super great resource if you want to do something like configure waves that you'll have to fight when you come to this room and hit this trigger. Or maybe there's a certain pool of puzzles in your game that the game randomly chooses from to spawn in, and you want each puzzle to be configurable. And so you hook up a bunch of prefabs into a data structure like this. This. And you specify how much time the player has to solve that puzzle and what the reward is, what game object gets spawned in and where when the puzzle is finished. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take a break now, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to load up the horror game I've been working on, and that we released the demo to on itch. And I'm going to show you how this can work in a larger scale game than what you might be working on in your P3. So I'll start that thing loading up, and go ahead, let's take a break. I'll get the music going. Can we hear? We can still hear the me channel music, so I'm going to change it, okay? Let's change it to some, let's get some Castlevania going, some classic Castlevania. And then we'll wait until about 3:35. You can ask any questions you have during that time, okay? If you think about it, I'm curious, chat, what's everyone munching on? What is everyone drinking? If you think about it, I'm eating an egg right here. Eggs, right? Eggs have everything you need to like get a life started, right? A little bird, all the nutrients you need. And so it's not really that surprising that eggs are so healthy, is it? They're sort of like packages of everything a life form needs to grow and survive. Ishwar had some Pocari Sweat. Is that sweet or sweat? Which is the Japanese sports drink. I don't know if I like the idea of drinking sweat. I pulled an all-nighter and I'm trying to just power through the day. I'm sorry, man. That's tough. Make sure you get some rest at least this weekend, okay? If not much earlier. It's sweat. That is a name and a half. I would probably drink that just to know what sweat tastes like, but that's disgusting, isn't it? It's got to be it's almost so disgusting that you can't help but be intrigued. What will your friends and family think when you say, "Hey, would you like to try some of my sweat?" Ew, ew, ew. And then you hand them the sweat energy drink and they're like, okay, haha. Gotcha. Evan here, eating some leftover rice. Rice is really good stuff. It's not very exciting, but if you get excited by really quick foods that are really healthy and give you a lot of energy, then rice could be considered pretty exciting. So good for you. Good for you. Okay. I believe that's just about it. I want to show you... Oh, we're still loading. We're still loading the horror game. We'll get back into it as soon as it's done loading. Let's get some Mega Man going here. Excellent. I think you'll find that they're very flexible and they're very powerful. For handling damage typing. Awesome. Very cool. My dog wanted to be in my room here with me, and she is just hiding underneath my desk right now. It's very cute. She's trying to get my attention, tell me to go outside. I think she thinks people are gonna arrive home soon, so she wants to leave the room. I'm gonna let her leave real quick, and then I'll be back. We'll go to the park, okay? We'll go to the park, Ellie, but just we need a little bit. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead, and I think we're just about done. Almost. Yes. Ishwar, learning about scriptable objects can be a game changer. They're really nice. Yeah, you can change their value at runtime, which means that you can actually edit your game in a way while you play the game, because they do not lose their changes like normal game objects do. So it's really neat stuff. Yeah, we might graduate the scriptable object mini lecture to more of a full lecture if people find it useful enough. We probably also would want to move it a little bit earlier in the semester so that you can get used to it and practice it on P2, but then really use it thoroughly in P3. While we wait for this to open up, this project to finish, I'd like to share a little bit of advice that we actually said during your playtesting feedback. Usually, when you add something to the game, you need, let's say you take a week to get something into the game. But just because it's in the game does not mean it's going to work very well, does not mean it's going to be bug-free, does not mean people are going to understand its guidance, does not mean it's going to be useful to the game, and balanced properly. So it usually takes a week to make something, and then another week or more until that thing is actually working well and being impactful in the game. So try and think a little bit ahead of time if you can. Think, I'm going to add this new system to the game, but I only have a few weeks left. Is it going to be balanced in time? It is expensive to add something new to a game because it's way more than just getting it to work. You have to make it work well and with players, okay? So let's go here. I have this horror game in the dorm scene. Let's go ahead and fly around a little bit. So this game is a horror game where you're trying to escape this area, this building. And part of this building is, part of the puzzle here is that you have these hints that usually tell you something about what you need to do, but not everything. And so you have documents like this note here that is up against the wall. And it's literally just a quad that was colored yellow, but in the game it actually looks great. And so if you look at this object, and I'll get rid of my face here, you can see that there's an AF document on it. Okay? This stands for affordance document. In other words, this object affords you the ability to read a document. And the document that we want to read is a scriptable object. It's called doc_RA phone note. And if we double click on this object, we can actually see it's right here. Here it is. And we can see what kind of data you can customize on a document. In this game, like many survival horror games, you can provide a note for the document so that in your menu you can understand like what document you're opening and reading. You can provide sound effects for when you open up the document and then when you scroll through the pages of it, right? Because a document on the computer in an email is needs different sound effects than a document that is a piece of paper in the world, right? You can allow the player to store a document or not. You can provide pages. So you have an array of pages, and each page data structure has a page text. It has a background image. You can customize whether that page makes the background image very beautiful and visible or not. And you can do all sorts of cool stuff, okay? Now, I want to show you what this looks like, because this data, this scriptable object, is interpreted and consumed by a document manager system at runtime that then allows the player to view this document, scroll between pages, and do stuff like that. This is probably going to lag a lot because I'm streaming, but we'll see. Cross your fingers. Come on, enter play mode. It's taking 30 seconds? Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's go ahead and mute the audio here. We'll close it. Oh, it's lagging a ton. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's so laggy. That's okay though. So we're gonna run through our building here. We're gonna go to that document and we'll look at it. I guess I can turn the music back on. And you can read the document. You can see exactly what the contents of each page was. You can see in the background that there's a dark faded image of a note, right? Because you just looked at a note. If you had looked at the computer, you'd see a computer back there. You can read stuff. Sometimes pages can be configured to have a vocal clip play out. So like if something like sudden and scary is written in one of these, then your character might go, oh, and gasp or something. Anyway, it's simple, but we get a lot of power out of a system like this. And scriptable objects let our designers really easily go in and experiment and change and tweak stuff. When the designers want a new feature, like maybe they want a piece of code to execute when you go to a certain page, or a variable to change its value, then we can add those features into the document datum, which is the scriptable object, and then they can customize what logic it is that executes when we go to a certain page, okay? So anyway, that's an example of it, scriptable objects finding a lot of use in a slightly larger project than what you are currently working on. Okay, so let's go ahead and get out of here. What I'd like to do, and if you have any questions, be sure to ask. I might have lost, I've lost my ability to read your messages here. Let me just get it going on my phone real quick. Okay. So feel free to ask any questions about scriptable objects or Mixamo, and I'd be happy to answer them. In the meantime, though, we have a few things that we need to get to. We need to finish off the Scaling Your Project lecture. That's why it was lagging. We have multiple projects open, multiple Unity editors open. Okay, we don't need to save that. Okay, we don't need to be rendering that either. That's probably another reason it was so slow. Okay, so last time we were talking about the idea of big game teams. Game development is so unique in that it requires so many different disciplines of wildly diverse nature to interact and to collaborate. And that can often generate a lot of friction, right? You've got a lot of very different people with very different backgrounds, and they are coming at problems. They have very different problems that intersect in different ways. And so it can be it can be a big challenge. It can be a lot of friction generated. However, last time, if you recall, we watched this phenomenal clip from the Halo 3 making of documentary in which the artists at Bungie, in which the engineers at Bungie showed that there wasn't all that much friction, but what there was is a lot of inspiration, a lot of collaboration, people becoming more than the sum of their parts by working together and inspiring each other. And so that is something that you'll want to do and you'll want to work at. Trying to understand these other disciplines is going to be very, very important no matter where you end up. Even, general tech companies like Facebook, they're filled with UX people, they're filled with artists, they're filled with producers and business people, and you really need to develop a taste for learning about other disciplines, okay? I'm not sure why this image is in there. That is to say that, there are a lot of big meetings on big games in a lot of diverse disciplines. Let's talk a little bit about the tools that kind of tend to spring up as you get into bigger and bigger projects. While you might not have that many tools for your current P3 project, there's a very good chance that you have some tinier ones. And if your P3 project went from like 4 people to something like 30, like you going to Wolverine Soft Studio next semester, which would be a great idea. I do recommend it. I love that course. It's so well run. Thank you, Amber. You'll find that you'll implement some of these really unique tools, and they're going to be bigger and more interesting. So one of those is a developer console. This is something that the Wolverine Soft Studio has, and they use to quickly develop games and execute cheats and test things really fast. Has anyone used or played a Source Engine game from Valve, be it Left 4 Dead or Garry's Mod or Half-Life? All of those games are built on the Source Engine, and by default, the Source Engine comes with its very own console and a bunch of cheat codes that you can use. This console sort of kind of looks like the Linux consoles that you might be a little bit used to, okay? Here's some video footage of this working. This is footage of a player essentially turning on a bunch of interesting console commands. During Source Engine games, you're able to pause the game, enable a developer console, and then you can use that console to get feedback. You can see what kind of errors have sprung up, if any exceptions have occurred. You can execute commands like no target. This is a command that will prevent an enemy from being able to target you, right? No target kind of makes sense. This is a really useful command for if you happen to be developing AI. It's really hard for you to study and look at AI and test it and make sure it's working okay if the AI is following you around and trying to attack you all the time, right? If you have to kill that AI or KO it, then it's going to despawn and you can't finish your tests. Here's a God Mode AI, a cheat code. It allows you to not take damage when you get shot, right? Here's a really cool one. It's the no-clip cheat. This is a very popular cheat code you'll find in many games. It allows you to fly, and it allows you to go through walls, so collisions no longer affect you. The reason you would use a cheat like this is because you're building a feature that's at the end of a level. You test the game by going into the level, and you have to play through it, right? But maybe playing through it takes 2 minutes. And so every time you make a tiny tweak to that end of level feature, and you've got to get it just right. You might have to do that 10 times, but every time you do it, you're going to lose 2 minutes just to walking to that feature and testing it, okay? And that's not going to be good for your iteration. You want that to be almost instant. Let's take it from 2 minutes to 10 seconds. You launch into the game, you fly immediately to the place where the new feature you're working on is, and then you deactivate the feature and test it, right? You deactivate flying, no clip, and then you test the feature. By taking your iteration time from about 2 minutes and 30 seconds to about 40 seconds, you have doubled the amount of iterations that you can do in the same amount of time. which means that you have more iterations, which means that you will have more polish, you'll have more ability to add new features, you'll have more ability to fix the tiny issues that players might find, or you can spend more time on other features that might be more important. And this is something that is multiplied by the number of hours you spend. So these are the kind of tools that are really, really great to put in early in a project, because you use them throughout the length of the project, and that initial investment to create the cheat codes pays back. It pays back every time you use them, and eventually becomes a huge win for your entire team. Anyway, here's an example of one that we implemented for one of Arbor Interactive's first games. It used reflection, which is really powerful in C#. It allowed you to bring up a console that looked like this. It's a little bit colorful, and you could type a class. MetaMind user info is one of them, and then it would tell you what functions were available inside that class in the little hint box up here. And then once you wrote a function, it would tell you what that function did, sets the current player's username, and then it told you what the parameters of that function was. And the only reason we could implement this was because we can use reflection. Reflection is essentially when you write code that reflects on code that exists in the code base. So you can write code that says what classes are in the current code base, what functions exist, okay, what are the parameters of those functions, and you can do this at runtime. It's very powerful. It is not particularly well supported in C++ though, which is a little bit disappointing. Okay, anyway, another cool idea for building tools that a lot of larger games tend to have is what we did in The Sims 4, which is when you launch your game, you tend to think of your game as like an interactive game. That's all your game is, all the program is. But what we did was we said, you know what? When we launch this program, The Sims 4, it's going to be a game, but it's also going to be an HTTP server. It's going to become a web server, and it's going to support the local host. So what would happen is we would play the game. I don't have any screenshots here. This is why the slide is so empty, sadly. But we would play the game, and then we would instantly we would launch our Chrome browser. We would launch it onto localhost at a particular port that the server was listening to. The server would then send us a bunch of HTML and CSS that gave us this beautiful interface into the game. So we could see every single one of our Sims that was living in our web browser while we played the game. And we could see their stats, their motives going down and decreasing over time. We could run cheat codes to increase those motives. We could do all sorts of stuff. We could see what the Sim was thinking, what they wanted to do. So when a bug happened in the game, and when the game got itself into a really weird state, we could look at what every Sim was thinking, and we could try and debug it that way. It was super, super helpful. Tools. Big game projects tend to use a lot of external tools, things like Tiled. Tiled is actually the software we used on Goodbye Groundhog, which was like a 2-week game that we released for the locally sourced bundle on itch.io. Yeah, you can really easily like paint your environment and have those objects spawn in the world as 3D models. You can go in and say, hey, I want to, where's the stamp? Here it is. I want to draw a new area. So it's going to be this area, and it's going to be linked to this one right here. And we're going to go ahead and fill in with the walkable tile, just like that. There we go. We're done. We're going to go ahead and place in here. We're going to place an item in here. What kind of item do we want to place? Let's go ahead and let's place an item right here. What item is that going to be? It's going to be item of ID 20, because that's the power-up item. Anyway, you can really quickly create 2D worlds and areas and iterate them really quickly via this approach. All right, let's get rid of this data though. Cool, gone. Okay, yeah, there are middlewares like Wise, which are dedicated to making your audio person's life a lot easier, allowing them to say, hey, we've got 3 sound effects for footsteps in snow. We want these 3 footsteps to be played randomly, so we'll create a random set. And if you happen to be walking over grass, we're going to use this other random set, and stuff like that. Okay, let's talk about pipelines. Pipelines are a really interesting topic and something that's important to you even on your Project 3. And by a pipeline, I mean this. What is the process, the exact process, that some assets take to get into your game? What is the exact process in your game right now on P3 for creating a new level? What is the pipeline for creating a new enemy? How many art assets does it involve? How many pieces of code does it involve? Do you have to rewrite every component on it, or can you reuse some components? Do you need to place these enemies, or is there a generator that automatically places them at certain spots when you walk through an area? Thinking about how a piece of content gets into your game and actually becomes playable to the user is really important. If you can reduce that amount of time, if you can reduce the number of people that requires, then you can really improve your iterative process, make it a lot faster, and get a lot more polish and mileage out of your time as a result. Here's a story. Evaneer99 says, here's the process. One of us makes a scene, and the rest of us deal with about 20 merge conflicts later, and typically like 20 minutes before we submit. Yeah, that's rough, right? And that's really not good. If you find that you are spending, most of your team members are spending a ton of their time on merge conflicts, then that is not time that you're spending iterating and experimenting on a new feature. And if you can get rid of that issue, if you can even reduce it down to like 3 or 4 merge conflicts instead of 20, then that could be humongous, because it's 15 merge conflicts gone per user, right? And you have a team of 5, but it's not just that. It's 15 merge conflicts reduced per user per scene, right? Which means that you have the entire rest of the project to reap the benefits of that tiny investment if you can quickly figure out how to improve that pipeline, okay? So I'll give you a story. On The Sims 3, we had a really big problem, okay? If a designer wanted to change a tiny thing about the Sims, right? If they wanted to change how long it took for a Sim to finish a certain meal, like currently it takes 20 seconds to finish a meal, but the game would feel a lot better and a lot speedier and more interesting if it took 15 or 10. Well, if a designer wanted to experiment with that change and then eventually apply it, here was the pipeline. The designer has an idea for a game design change. The designer has to go find an engineer with some free time, and engineers are almost never free, so that's really hard. Okay? They have to find an engineer with free time, and then the engineer has to go fix it, and hopefully they eventually do. Okay? Because all of the numbers that powered these kinds of things, like the duration of time it takes for a meal to finish, on The Sims 3, it was all hard-coded. Okay? Chat, how many of you have hard-coded values in your project? Have, that might be like, the number of items it needs to open a door, or maybe the number of lives you start with, or the amount of health you lose over time, right, in a hot summer day. How many of you have magic numbers floating around in your code base that might be a little bit hard for someone to find if they really wanted to change it? Do any of you have that issue? Maybe you've all learned so much from the design patterns in this course, and you're just perfect code bases, no problem, right? So Evaneer says only a few. It's mostly in my code. That's good. That's really good. If you can keep it low, we always have some hard-coded stuff, but we want to try and get that out into an area where it's easy to find and easy for others to change without having to think about code. Okay. Most things are inspector configurable at this point. That's really good news. So this approach right here in The Sims was not good for several reasons that are probably obvious to you. The first thing is that the time requirement was really high, right? The designer couldn't immediately act on their intuition. They had to go negotiate with an engineer, and then they had to wait for the engineer to change it, and that's before the designer could even understand whether the change was working or not. And then if they wanted to change it back, they had to go back to that engineer and then request to change back. Big pain. The people requirement was also very high. You had to have 2 people, a designer and an engineer, synchronize, and they both had to spend some amount of their time fixing this issue. And switching is not expensive, right? Grabbing an engineer off of what they were focusing on before to go implement a tiny change for you, that slows the engineer down a lot. It interrupts their thought process, makes other problems they have take longer. And time is really, really, really important. You will eventually be, on bigger teams at bigger companies, and you are not cheap, okay? You have to understand that. If you're working on California, if you're working even in Michigan, your time is not cheap at all. And so you want to do anything you can to try and save it. And on this project, you don't have a lot of time, so it's valuable even though there isn't a price associated with it. On The Sims 4, we wanted to deal with this. We noticed that the pipeline was not working very efficiently. Okay, this was not fun, this was really distracting, and it was slow. And so for The Sims 4, we had an idea. We said, let's take the pipeline and let's change it to this, okay? I have an idea for a change I want to make to this game. I'm going to open up an XML editor on my own, and I'm just going to make the change. That is it. I'm just going to make the change myself. If you think about this, now we have a much lower time requirement. The designer can actually act on their intuition immediately. And if they can find the value in the XML, which is going to be much easier than finding it in the code base, then they can just change it. They can change it right away and see the results and change it back if they want to. The people requirement was also low. The designers did not need to interrupt an engineer in order to get these changes done, which was really, really effective. It saved engineers time. It avoided the expensive context switch of your brain going from working on one problem to another. And it was a humongous win. This, right, versus this. However, something to note is that often improving your pipelines is not free. It often takes a big upfront investment of time and focus and energy to actually improve a pipeline that you currently have. So this pipeline might save you, let's say the pipeline ends up saving you 60 seconds every time you want to make a change. That's not realistic. In reality, it would save you a lot more time. But and it's going to take, you about an hour or maybe 2 hours to make this pipeline change in your P3 project. You can do the math. Ask yourself, how often do people on this team make a change? And how quickly will that time add up? In a week, how much time do I think that we'll have saved? Multiplying by the number of changes we tend to have per day, multiplied by the number of people we have making changes per day, multiplied by the number of days. As soon as I think that's going to be larger than 60 minutes, the 60 minutes I think it will take me to fix the pipeline, then it's worth doing, and you should do it, okay? The earlier you do it, the more value you're going to get from that investment. So that is the calculus that you should be kind of thinking about when you're thinking about your processes. And you should reserve some time every week to think about, okay, how can I make all of this easier to do? How can I make it easier to produce levels? How can I make it easier to create a puzzle? Stuff like that, okay? And the expense here in the Sims 3 example was we had to produce a new XML parsing engine, and we had to produce a new XML editing tool so that designers could actually read the XML and quickly edit it, okay? The last thing I want to talk about today is the topic of funding. And this is something that might seem like it's kind of tangential to this course. But in reality, it's not. You will soon find yourself on small teams, on startups, on academic teams in grad school, on small teams within a large corporation. And your team's ability to get funding will determine what your team is able to accomplish, what you are able to accomplish, okay? And particularly if you do what Yoked did and you take your Project 3 final project and you take it to the publishers and you try and get a publisher and you try and get it onto the Steam store and all of that, it's going to be really important for you. So here's a couple things to consider. Yeah, game production is really expensive. If you think about your average indie game, it might have a couple people working on it. It might have a junior artist, junior engineer, junior designer. That's a pretty typical composition for a team. And you might hire out a junior freelancer to contribute a handful of minutes of music to your game. You might take about a 2-year dev cycle. That's what a lot of indies, if you walk around PAX, the indie mega booth, if you walk around and ask them how long it took their game to get to that point, they'll probably say about 2 years. 494 games tend to take a little bit less time than that, like 6 months to 1 year, I think, if you're gonna put it on Steam or itch. The projected cost here, though, is really scary. Okay, you got 3 core team members, and if you pay them significantly less than the median wage in Michigan, which is around 50 grand, if you pay them like 30 grand for 2 years, then you're already almost at 200 grand that you need to somehow come up with to pay your team. If you say we're going to have 60 minutes of music times $100 per piece of music, which is kind of the rate for a junior musician, then you're going to pay $6,000, okay? And that's tough. You're about 200 grand. You have to somehow come up with that to finish your indie game, and this isn't including stuff like equipment fees, licensing, legal fees, and stuff like that. So it is, it's tough, all right? Yeah, getting on the Steam store isn't as difficult as it used to be. A publisher would probably be most useful getting you onto consoles, which are still kind of stingy with their dev kits. Braid, the indie game that we've talked about in this course a couple times, cost around 200 grand to make. And it is not a super long game, and it's not a super big game either, okay? 200K in 2 years. Okay, so let's keep going. Where do you find this kind of money? Where do you find resources like this if you're a small indie team? Well, it can be kind of tough, but there are a lot of options these days. The first option is probably the most accessible, but it's also one of the least exciting and slowest. Hey, go get a job, right? Go get a full-time job, and then in your hobby time or in evenings, you work on your games, or you save the money from your full-time job and you build up a nest egg, and then when you've got a couple $100 grand saved up, maybe you take a couple of years off and you try and finish your indie game with that those savings. Investments. Right? This is super slow, but this is also the reason many of us will be able to retire. The idea is you save enough money and you put that money to work in like financial assets. You go and invest in ETFs, stocks, whatever you want. And eventually, if you are well diversified, the current rate is about 7% per year you'll make. So if you put a big block of money into an investment, you'll hopefully make about 7% back every year over the long term. But actually only about 5% because 2% goes away to inflation. And if that 5% you're making per year is large enough, then you can actually pay your bills with that. And then you don't have to work a job and you can go put all of your time into your startup if you want to. Grants and angel and venture capital. These are the fastest routes to go. So let's say you don't want to wait for you to have a big nest egg that generates dividends for you, and you don't want to go and get a job right away. What you can do is there are a lot of institutions out there, like Ann Arbor Spark, the Downtown Incubator, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, 1,000 Pitches, institutions that are here to help small teams, small companies get their start. Help them with grants, help pay their legal fees, help connect them with investors, give them office space for free, right? These are really, really, really cool services that many people don't know about, but that if you do know about them, you can get a lot of value from. 1,000 Pitches is a competition that I think will give you like 20 grand if you happen to have the best business pitch at their competition, or top 3, right? And you'll get some financial grants to go and make your business work, go make your game. Ann Arbor Spark has been really, really awesome lately. They actually fund internships for local companies to hire University of Michigan, Wolverine Soft and 494 students to do cool XR and game dev stuff. In fact, Ann Arbor Spark is sponsoring our showcase. I haven't asked about this yet, but soon we're going to ask who in this course is still looking for an internship, because we're going to have about 4 companies at our showcase event that have an internship slot that Ann Arbor Spark will help pay for that is reserved to people in this course. So anyway, look forward to that. You can do contract work. So there are a lot of people and organizations these days, from companies to professors, as we see here. Professor Wayne Baker actually hired me back in the day to produce a cool visualization. There are a lot of people out there who will pay you to have access to your skill set. And so that is a way that you can develop your skills while being paid and paying your bills, and while building up your technology, so that when you have enough to turn around and start working on your indie game, you will have the skills, you'll have the cash, you'll be there, you'll have the contacts, and you'll be good to go. We'll talk a little bit more about this. There are a lot of studios in the industry that manage to keep themselves alive and sustained by creating games for other publishers, right? Licensed games, cheap games if they want, anything to keep the lights on. One really cool recent development, these services, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Fig, are not that old, but they've had a huge impact. These are services, crowdfunding, that will allow you to go out and pitch, essentially, to your consumers directly and get money from them. A really excellent studio at this is Nochi Studios. They're downtown Ann Arbor. Their entire engineering team is comprised of EECS 494 and Wolverine Soft students, I think. And they're led by Natalie Feng, who's an incredible businesswoman out of the Ross School of Business. And she's super good at reliably getting 10 to 15 grand to fund these new mobile games, these visual novel style mobile games. And that's the money that she takes and then turns around and uses it to hire our interns, our UMich interns, which is super, super cool. Anyway, you can do that too if you want to. It's tricky, but it can work. One place you should go to for money is friends and family. Can anyone in chat guess why you typically want to avoid asking friends and family for funding, for money? Can you guess? Can you think? Why? How could it go really bad if I take money from friends and family for a product, for a company that is unproven? What could go wrong? Riddle me this. Let's say you take 20 or 30 grand from Aunt Sally, and it doesn't go very well, and so you end up losing that money. Oh, that's going to be a really awkward Thanksgiving and holiday season, isn't it? Every single Thanksgiving, you're sitting across from Aunt Sally. The turkey looks beautiful. Aunt Sally says, "Well, Austin, where's my money, Austin? Do you have my 30 grand yet, Austin? Nice turkey, by the way. Where's my money?" Right? That's going to really, it's not going to be great, because your friends and family will invest in you, chances are, without knowing a whole lot about your business, and they're not smart money. They're going to invest in you because they like you. They're not going to invest in you because they think your idea has good business merit. And so it can go really wrong and really fast, and you can really burn some important relationships if you take money from friends and family. So avoid that if you can, all right? It's an interesting thing to think about. On the topic of contract work, this is a very, very popular way to do it. And this is actually something that Arbor Interactive did until recently. We made games for the federal government. We made games for random YouTube channels on YouTube. Give us 6 grand and we'll make your match 3 game for you. Sure thing, right? No problem. Platinum Games is a famous studio in Japan that is famous for putting out some really great and well-received action games. However, the games that are really well-received and that do very well are supported in part because Platinum Games will also make games for licenses. They'll make your Ninja Turtles game in 6 months that you barely want to pay for. Yeah, they'll make that. They'll make your Legend of Korra game, right, for Activision, and get some cash that way. But there's no shame in this. They'll use this to keep themselves alive. They'll do the best they can with the resources they're given. And that's how they survive to make the critically acclaimed stuff. So anyway, it's an interesting topic. And while it might feel that this isn't important, the kind of things we've talked about in this lecture, dealing in developing an empathy for diverse teams, understanding other disciplines and what their challenges are, and how to work with them well. Thinking about tooling and pipelines and what it can do, what a good initial investment can do for the rest of your project, and thinking about funding How do you get resources? How do you keep your teams alive? Keep them doing cool stuff? These are all questions and topics that will become very important to you very soon. If they're not already relevant to you on your P3, then they certainly will be when you leave here, okay? If you join Wolverine Soft Studio, you'll feel this very quickly. If you join a company, if you join an academic research lab, you go to grad school, you'll feel this as well, okay? So it is something that you want to start thinking about. It's a very fun topic. We have concluded about 5 minutes early, so I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to ask any questions you want. I'll turn the music back on, and we'll get some Castlevania going, some more Castlevania, this time from the Genesis era. And I thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic week. I hope you get a little bit of time to rest, but please watch your feedback footage. You should get your peers' feedback footage from at around midnight tonight. That's when it's due. But you already have the footage from your instructors. So please review that. If it's a little bit harsh, we apologize. We just want you to be the best you can be. Please take care and have a fantastic week, and we will see you next time, okay? I'll stick around, I'll turn some music on, and we can answer some questions. Let's get some Castlevania Bloodlines going for the Sega Genesis. Favorite 3D Mario game? Okay, so to be fair, I don't have that many options. There is Super Mario 64, there's Super Mario Sunshine, there is Super Mario Odyssey, and then you might consider Super Mario 3D World as well. You might also consider Super Mario 3D Land for the 3DS. Super Mario 3D Land for the 3DS has the best final boss by a mile. It's not even remotely close to any other game. Oh, there's Galaxy. I forgot about Galaxy. There's Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2. I think I like Sunshine the best. It's the one that I grew up with. It is also the one that I think has the kind of the fastest traversal mechanics. It has a really nice dive. You can shoot water and slip through it to go really fast. You can do a lot of flips. You can hover to get a little bit more mileage out of your traversal mechanics. I also like the theme. I like the vacation theme. It all might feel a little bit samey to some people, but it all feels cohesive and connected. It feels like all the individual stages, they're not random paintings in a castle. They're places that exist on an island, and they all make sense. You could see the places from each other. You can go to one place, you can go to Pinna Park, and you should be able to see some of the girders from, what is it, Dry Docks or something? I can't remember what the other place is, but, yeah. So yeah, I like Sunshine. Galaxy's pretty good, but I also find it a little bit boring because of the traversal. It's so simple. It just feels like running, jumping, and the occasional, nerfed long jump sometimes. Yeah, Sunshine was clearly rushed, and it has a ton of rough edges, but I still kind of love it. I also love the voice acting. These are some of the worst cutscenes. They're so bad, they're amazing. Objection! Overruled! Okay, yeah, Super Mario 3D Land's final boss is amazing because you're not actually fighting something, it's just more platforming, which is what Mario's great at in the first place. The combat, I don't think, has ever been Mario's strength as a series, but platforming certainly is, and that final boss is all just an escape sequence. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Wait, I'm wondering what they'll do for the Super Mario movie. because I feel like they'll have to get some sort of voice acting going on, sort of like the Sonic movie did. Sonic already had voice acting, though. I think they might keep Mario using broken English, just phrases every once in a while, right? Which could probably work pretty well, but they'll have to give some secondary characters, maybe like Luigi or Princess Peach, they'll probably have to give them full voice acting just to keep a plot going. Okay, let's see here. Okay, good question. Would it be better to take Wolverinesoft Studio or Independent Study first? I would say Studio. I would say Wolverinesoft Studio, unless you need a letter for graduate school. So I'll write a letter for you to help you get into graduate school, but only if you've taken 499. So if you need a letter for graduate school, then you should take 499 earlier. Otherwise, I would take Wolverinesoft Studio earlier. Yeah, dev kits are pretty expensive. They're cheaper now than they used to be. But they can be pretty hard to get a hold of. Study. Yeah. Okay. Team, I think that's just about it. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone, and thank you for your efforts this week.